Hey everyone, it's Tiger with one more line of code. We're going to continue with episode 6 for Riome. We've got a lot of database context work, including some repositories, and I'm going to start getting into some dynamic handling for our services, just a lot of our services. They're starting to build up, and I want to kind of start loading them more dynamically so that I don't have to keep registering them. Anyways, I got a lot to get to today, so I really want to just jump in. So I'm afraid this will be split into maybe 2 or 3 parts again, but let's just kind of cram in and see what we can get to. So step 1, of course, is let's grab Rider. We'll open Riome. And if you remember last episode, right kind of where we had finished, we had pulled this Riome DbContext into here. Just for the sake of testing, we're doing a little user count. Now, one of the things I do want to do is get this, we really can't be doing, or really shouldn't be, pulling in DbContext here. These should always be handlers. So I want to get this moved over to a handler. In order to get that to a handler, I need to build repositories. In order to build repositories, I really want to get switched over to the factory pattern. But before all of that starts, I really want to start getting into more of the dynamics quick of these handlers and these endpoints and stuff. I just, as I was watching the videos, I noticed that they're going to kind of crop up, and I keep kind of pushing it behind. So let me just jump on that right away. So what I mean when I'm talking about dynamically adding handlers, I guess dynamically adding a bunch of services. We're probably going to do this in a bunch of places. These health check handlers, for example, health check and health check fail. Independency injection, I need to do this add scoped thing. The problem is, as I get hundreds of these, I'm just going to kind of, just keep going down here with a bunch of them. And that's not ideal. What I'd like to do is just kind of mark them somehow and then use the system to loop through and just add them all as scoped. Just by like a folder that they're in or whatever. The way that I do that is called marker interfaces. I don't know if marker interfaces is a real term or whatever, but everyone in my line, like I guess the people that I work with, they all know what that means when I say marker interface. So I don't know if schools are teaching that, if it's the right words for it or not, but I'll show you what they are really quick. And then we will implement handlers, one for endpoints, and we will actually probably set one up for the new repositories as well. So let us do that. These handlers we'll start with. In application, in common, I'm going to make a new folder called interfaces. In here, we're just going to house mostly marker interfaces. So I will make a new interface, and I'm just going to call this iScoped request handler. And that's it, nothing in it. Put a little comment, just so anybody looking knows what it is. Now, on my handlers themselves, all I do is I'll inherit from that class. In this sense, I'm marking them with this interface, where, the interface is useless aside from, letting me tag it, kind of. And now, in my dependency injection, what I can do, instead of needing to add all these, all I need to do is loop through my assembly and find everything that's inheriting from iScope request handler. What I will do, let's make a private class for that, static void, and we'll just call it add handlers, add scoped handlers. I'm trying to be specific on calling it scoped as opposed to like singleton handlers or transient handlers. I don't think we'll have any, but I just kind of like the separation of the terms just for the sake of if something comes up later. What I'm going to need to do here is I need to grab the assembly, and I can do that a couple ways. Assembly, which would be, I guess it'd be this. Get executing. I can do it like this, and this for the most part should work. But what I'm going to do, because I'm going to use this probably in more places, on a lot of these projects, the same way that I have this little dependency injection file on the bottom of all of them, I'm going to add an assembly reference file to the bottom of all of them. I'm going to call it, whatever the project name is, assembly reference. So this one is application assembly reference. And it'll be static. And I spelled assembly wrong, so let me fix that quick. assembly reference. So it updated the file name and up here. Public static assembly, which returns assembly.getExecuting. It's not giving me the, what do you call it, the smart text pop-up stuff, because I don't have the reference for it yet. Now that I do, I can call it getExecuting. Not to be confused with getEntry. I've made this mistake before, and it can screw up a lot of stuff because it'll still build, it'll compile properly, but you'll be getting the wrong assembly. The getEntry assembly is always the assembly that it came through from the start. So in our case, most of the time, our entry assembly is going to be web API. If I'm trying to get the application assembly and I keep getting web API, it's going to screw everything up. So getExecuting is the one that I'm going to want. And I'm going to copy this and pretty much put it on everything except for contract with, of course, the same, with the proper naming for it. I used to do this without naming it the project name because it's just quicker. You can copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. What happens is sometimes you'll be in code and you have a reference to some other project and then you just call assembly reference, but it grabs the wrong project's assembly reference. This way is a little bit more declarative in that I know 100% which assembly reference I'm getting. Couple more. Persistence. Oops. Assembly reference. Import. And then I'm going to put one on both WebAdmin and Web API. Of course, as usual, we're not doing much with WebAdmin right now, but while we're here, might as well do it. Last one. Lovely. Okay, now back up to our dependency injection. Here's what I need here. I need that assembly. Application assembly reference.assembly. And then I need to do a couple things. I need to loop through this, and it's fairly simple in that it's like get types, and then it's a where clause, where, oh, I forget the name. I don't remember how to do this, but it's like where type of is instance of and not a class and not an interface and not an abstract. I'm yapping away. Basically, I need to loop through this to get all of the ones that reference I scoped request handler. So I am going to kind of write up what I need. Loop through the assembly and get all types that inherit I scoped request handler and add each individual class, I spelled assembly wrong, as a scoped service. Now, I'm going to use AI to kind of complete this. You can Stack Overflow this too, but I kind of want to show as I go through. I'll use AI a little bit, we'll Stack Overflow a little bit, we'll jump all over the place because I really want to kind of, there's 10 ways to do everything. So I have the little baked in one here. This one is location aware, so I can just kind of tell it to import this and do it. But since that's a paid for one, I just want to show you quickly. I'll probably use that one a bit more than the others, but just for the sake of showing you, I'm going to copy the whole the method, the function, and I can even go to like even the freebie one here and just plop this in and say, can you implement this function? And it'll give me a bunch of code, and we will grab it. And of course, nice little cute explanations too, if you're interested. He probably does a better job explaining it than I do. Okay, So assembly, obviously this line was there already. I need to add the, oh funny, it took iScope request handler as like a generic type, so that's why the little bars here, but we can get rid of those. Now I can implement missing. Okay, so this is not quite what I want. This is definitely not what I want, actually. So get types where it loops. So get all the interfaces on a type, and then if any of them is a generic type, it has something weird about it. Trying to figure out if this was an iScope request handler. I really just need is assignable. Oh crap! From or to. This is the problem. Can I just put in a type here? What do you need? iScoped request handler. It's really more like something like this, and not type as abstract. Now we're getting closer, and not type as interface. That'll work. Is interface. Come on now. I think that's closer to what we want. I'm gonna pull this just aside out of curiosity here, and kind of back this up. I got a feeling it has to do with the way that I kind of worded this. So we're back to the original, right? And out of curiosity, I just want to see, can you implement add scoped handlers? I usually have better luck with I guess not better. I have more luck than that with all of them. I've never had it usually go that bad. No, this is doing the same thing. Oh, I suppose it's using OpenAI, so it's pretty much the same thing. Let me try Gemini. No, it's got to be with the way that I worded it. So I just worded it funny. Huh. Oh well. I got what I needed. Back to this. I'm gonna switch. I almost did that out of habit. I have a little green underline here. This is asking me to merge into a pattern. I can write patterns very, very quickly, and I can read these. I guess I can write this very quickly, and I can read it well enough. But I do believe that a pattern, which this is now switched to a pattern, I think visually, I think this is faster for me to read and understand. If I'm just glancing over this, I do believe this is faster to pick up because I'm not missing like some silly little, exclamation in front of it. So I do, if you see me ever kind of hitting the little green and merging to a pattern, that's all that is. I can't write that anywhere near as quickly yet, but I can read it better, so I'll usually switch it. So back to where we were. Get handler types, grab all types where is assignable to. Now this maybe is assignable from, we're going to test that out. Get a list of them. So this will give me a list of all types that are inheriting from iScope request handler. So right now it should be those two types. For each of those two types, register them as scoped. Perfect. The other thing that I do see every now and then here is I'll see something like this, iScope request handler. You'll see something like this where it's registering it as an iScope request handler of the whatever handler type. This is bad. This won't get you anywhere. I guess for the sake of, let's just explain. I don't know how far down this path of teaching I want to go down, right? But there's two ways to register things, right? Well, there's tons of ways to register things. But if I did something like this, check handler. So these two things sort of look like they're both registering a health check handler, right? They're not. One of them is registering a health check handler, the other is registering an iScoped request handler. To the code, it makes a huge difference, because when I'm pulling something from dependency injection, if I register this way, I can only like grab a health check handler out of the bucket. If that's what I want, that's awesome. In this case, that's exactly what I want. In this case, if I was doing it like this and I try to say, you know, give me a health check handler out of the bucket, out of the service bucket, out of dependency injection, I wouldn't get one. It would tell me that it doesn't exist. There's no service for that of that type registered. So it would fail. I could say, give me an iScope request handler, but if I have multiples of them, it's going to give me whichever one is, I think, last or first. I believe it's, I don't know which way it is, but either the first one or the last one that's registered is what it's going to give me, which obviously is not what I want. That would mess all kinds of things up. Now, for our repositories, that will be a little bit different. In that case, we actually want to register the interface, but you'll see that set up when we get there. So just make sure that when you're doing something like this, you're registering your types the way that you want them registered for whatever makes sense for you. So this should work. We got to check on the T thing. So let me call add scoped handlers. And then what we'll do right now, just to run this, as long as we do our, because I'm not adding the health check, you know, scopes here anymore, I should be able to do any of my health check success or fails. And this should actually tell me kind of what's going on. Sure, let's do that. I'll run that. I'll get Postman up. So let's see. It looks like it works, which is good. A little off center there. It's probably bugging people. So this fires, which is great. Health check fail, of course, will fire too. This means that the handlers are getting registered appropriately the way that we want to. So that's exactly what we want. Let's go ahead and stop. So this one is working. I want to do basically the same thing, but I'm going to do just slightly different for our endpoints. Let me go to our endpoints and let me zoom back out a bit and get some space there. I want to do basically the same thing, but I want to do it on endpoints. So in Web API and our endpoints, I only have the one endpoint right now, but if you remember how we're setting those up, in our program.cs, we have this little block of code here. So again, if I had 500 groups of endpoints, I've got 500 news with whatever .map endpoints. I don't want to do that. That's going to take a long time and a lot of organization, which I just don't want to get into. So I'm going to use the same marker interfaces idea. On endpoints, I'm going to make like an I endpoints. That is kind of the tag or the trigger for these. Normally, if you only had one presentation layer, this should really exist kind of right next to it, so it would be on the Web API. So you make a common folder, put interfaces and an I endpoints there. Because I have the web admin, which is also going to have endpoints, I am going to put my I endpoints a layer below in application. So in application in common, in that same interfaces folder, I'm going to add an interface called I endpoints. And it's an interface. Even though this is a marker interface, I do want to use this to do work. If you see in the endpoints, they're all going to have this public I endpoint route builder map endpoints. So I want this endpoints to have that function. So let me give it. Now because I'm in application, if you're putting this web API, you won't have this problem. If you are using Serilog, you won't have this problem. If, however, you don't use Serialog or you're not, and you're still putting this in application, there is a good chance, because this is only a class library project, you won't have access to ASP.NET Core routing. So you have a couple options for doing that. Easiest one is probably just to add a NuGet package for it, like in application add ASP.NET Core routing. And you can add routing or abstractions. Both of them are deprecated, but I think both of them will give you what you need. I think it also comes as part of a hosting something. I think. I don't know for sure, but again, you can see it's deprecated. Doesn't really matter, but you can. It doesn't matter that they're deprecated at this point. This will still do what you need it to do because you're not actually doing much with it. You just need the class. So that'll give you that. I'm getting it through my Serialog because I have Serialog installed on Web API. Serialog is coming with something. Serialog. That's .NET Framework. So here it's coming with hosting abstractions and HTTP abstractions. So I'm assuming one of those two is giving me the routing, which is why I didn't have to import anything. Just so you're aware, that is one of the ones I know trips up a lot of people. And just to keep going at it, on Web API, if you F4 in Rider or F7, I think maybe in Visual Studio, maybe it's still F4, it gets you like the project, I don't know what you call it, the file behind. The project for Web API is a .NET.SDK.web project, and that's a Web API project. So .NET.SDK web application is just a .NET.SDK, not a .NET web or not a .web. You could just turn this into a .web project and save this. That would also give you access to routing. That would work. I'm not going to do that because I don't like completely changing project structure that way. It's a little bit dangerous. If you still didn't want to add the NuGet package and you didn't want to run this way, your other option is you could actually do a framework reference to Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.app. That would also give you access to routing. If I don't have any NuGet packages that are using it, that's my preferred method, is doing the framework reference. I don't remember what the call for it is, but it's something like I need ASP.NET Core routing as a framework. Can't see behind that thing. Reference. I need access to so this little bit right here. You can see it's not a package reference, it's a framework reference, and it's Microsoft. It's giving me routing, which is not what I want. I need access. The AI is not happy with me today. Microsoft. What is it that I even need here? I'm just burning time now, aren't I? This is how you get behind in projects. Common interfaces endpoints. ASP.NET Core.routing. I need ASP.NET Core.routing in a project. Can I use a framework reference? I don't think routing is correct. I wouldn't do that. I'm pretty sure, I don't know why it's mad at me, but I'm pretty sure it's just app. Everything else is the same, it's just .app. If routing works, great, go for it. But obviously we don't need it, you got tons of other options for it. There's just, a lot of weird stuff going on. A lot of ways. So this interface, iEndpoints, everything needs to have this function, this map endpoints function. So what this marker interface is going to be used for, I'm going to look for all of them using the triggering iEndpoints, using the marker. But on them now, I need to actually activate a version of them and fire this function, which means I need to use reflection on this one, which means this one's a little different. On Web API, in my dependency injection, let's go ahead and add another method for setting these up. I am going to make this one public and static because I'm not actually going to be calling this one from the normal add Web API. This is actually going to get called directly from the program.cs. It will take an iEndpoint route builder. Let's call it map endpoints. Now let's just call this app. Map. Okay. Now that that's up, even though it's not implemented yet, I can go back out to program. And what we're going to do here is it's map endpoints, I believe I called it. Yep. Now I can get rid of my old one. Yay. So here we want to do almost the same thing as the other to start, which is we grab the assembly reference. I'm going to try to write this up again. Loop through all types. What if I just say loop through the assembly and get all classes that inherit iEndpoints and fire the map endpoints method on them. My head's in the way. Let me just drop that down a line, maybe. There. So here, let's. Jippity's been bad today. Let's give it another shot. Implement. Do this. Maybe I gotta say please. This thing is so silly. Yeah, I'm not gonna do that either. This is close. Let me zoom this in a bit. This is close. Let me try this in the one here quick. The one baked in, I guess. Can you help implement map endpoints? Because it's location aware, it knows what I've got highlighted and selected, so I don't need to copy and paste it in. Yeah, this is much better. This is what we want. So the difference here, I think this is big enough where you can kind of see the difference here. One sec. So this is basically the same thing. And you see they got it is assignable from, but they got the types switched around from the other way that I had them, which is why my is assignable to worked properly. Maybe I should switch just for the sake of consistency. They got an is class and a not is abstract. They don't have a not is interface, but that's fine as long as they got the is class. What the big difference here, and the reason why I didn't like the OpenAI version here on this one, is this. This is creating a type. So this is the one we're going to use. Let's just put it in here so I can get you more real estate and walk you through what's happening. So let me import. So we grab all the types again. I'm going to change this to is interface. I'm going to flip this the other way. And move you up front. All that's just to try to be more consistent with the previous. They look more the same. So I get a bunch of endpoint types that are all inheriting from iEndpoints. This is all fine. This is all basically the same as what's on the other one. Now here's where the difference lies. So for each one of these, it's using reflection to create an instance of that, knowing and casting it as an iEndpoints type. This is the huge difference. And assuming it was able to do that, fire the map endpoints on it. In our GPT version, the start of it is similar, where it kind of goes and grabs we're not as interface, we're not abstract, we're as assignable from and all that stuff. That's all fine and dandy, but you can see here this gets different. Let me pull this section in here too, just to kind of compare it on our code. So this is the one I like, this is what we're going to go with, but down here, the one that this is doing is it's looking on the type for a method called map endpoints. This is using, I think this is reflection based, yeah, reflection binding flags to try to grab this function, making sure that it's, you know, a public or an instance method. And then if that method exists, then create an instance of this type and invoke that method passing in the app. Yeah, passing in the app. Okay. So map endpoints passing in the app. This is some goofy, weird workaround way in my head. We know it's an interface. We know it has this function on it. We know it can do all kinds of, we know it can do this, so I don't need to be doing the additional reflection here. So I'm getting rid of this one. I'm getting the green here because it says use pattern matching. Let's just see what the heck happens here. Yeah, this is, it rewrote it to is whatever instead of the null check. I like this. This is a little cleaner. Okay, let's run this right away because I got map endpoints there. Dependency injection has this set up. Let's just run this quick just to make sure that that's working. Dynamics can get pretty interesting, especially when you're looping through, you know, assemblies, and then when you start using reflection, things get interesting. I get a 404 because it doesn't exist, which is not good. That means that our endpoints are not getting fired, which means why. So we take a look at our assembly, endpoint types, get types. It's assignable for my endpoints. Did I assign this? I did not. Where the heck were you guys? I endpoints. So I'd never marked the actual, you know, the class to inherit from that. So nothing inherited from it, so nothing got set up. What we just fixed is that won't ever happen again now, because now every time I copy and paste this, it'll always be there, and I won't run into that issue where I forgot to add some scoped stuff. Let's pull this up again. Start with health check. Looks like that's true, and looks like that's false. So perfect. We're looking good. So we've got dynamic handlers, we've got dynamic endpoints, which is great. Let's move on to I want to get to the repositories, which means I need to switch the database into a factory pattern. That's very, very quick to do. In persistence, in dependency injection, what I have going on here is I have add DbContext. I'm going to change this to add DbContext factory instead. It's about the only change I'm going to make. The DbContext cannot run two queries on the same context. So when you're using one scoped context against the entire scope, if you do a lot of async processing where you're trying to send out one query over here and one query over here, and they're running on the same context, you will get errors because it won't let two run at the same time. It's a EF core limitation. So I'm going to run the DbContext factory, which will force me to create new contexts. I believe it does some pooling and stuff behind the scenes, so it's not like it's fully creating new contexts every time, but even if it does, they've gotten the overhead on this down very, very, very far. There is a chance I still may need a scoped DbContext at some point. I don't think I'm going to, so I'm going to leave it out, but just in case you do, you can actually still kind of just create like add scoped Riome DbContext. Oh my goodness, what was that? My auto stuff is just not on point today. It is just dying. So I get a service provider in here that I can use, and what you would do if this would let me do my job. What is happening? I did type that, right? service provider, I can get, yeah, now that one was fine. Okay. Let's just kind of drop this so you can see a little bit. So we get the service provider, we grab the factory, this DbContext factory that we made. This will grab that DbContext factory, generate a context, and add that version, add that one context in their scope service. So in this sense, you can still have one context that is scoped throughout the whole lifetime, and you can use your factory to create any other ones that you need. I'm going to just comment this out for now because I don't think I'm going to need it. I'm hoping I don't need it. I want to get rid of this kind of stuff completely and stick with just the context, the factories. When I get into using Blazor a lot more and a lot of async stuff, the context factory is really the way to go. So I'm going to stay down this route. Done there. So another thing checked off our box. I've got dynamic service registration. I've got DbContext factories. Now I need to get into repositories. Let's do that. On domain. Couple things here. So let me pull up my big picture. So in domain, I'm going to add interfaces. There is an argument that the interfaces for these repositories should go on the application layer. The application layer is going to be using interfaces. So application is going to use something like ifoo repository. And then in persistence, there will be a foo repository that is actually the repository getting implemented. Application won't know what the heck foo repository is, but it's going to be using ifoo repository in order to fire and work on foo repository. So there's debate on that application should be the one housing those whatever repositories. I'm going to put them on the domain level. I don't have any good justification or reasons why, just I like them there better, and I've run into weird situations where I think there was one time in one weird situation where I had to have something there, and it made it easier just to be in domain. Because they're only interfaces, it doesn't bother me at all, but it will probably bother somebody who is very hardcore on clean architecture or potentially even domain-driven design. I don't know if that's breaking one or two or both of them, but just know that I don't think it's necessarily correct to actually have these on domain. I'm going to do it that way because it works perfectly fine, and I don't have any hang-ups about doing it that way. So we'll put interfaces on domain, and we'll put the the implementations on persistence. Domain, common, not common, Riome models. So the way that I'm going to do this is everywhere where there's a, like a table set, there will always be, the table, and I'll always just add the interface right next to it. So iUser repository, okay, which is going to be an interface. Let's leave it at that for now. We're going to put some functions into here that we need to use, but I want to kind of jump to persistence and show you where those are going to go. So in RiomeDB, in persistence, every kind of folder, so in Riome models, whatever folders exist here, I'm pretty much going to have a folder that exists also in RiomeDB. So I'm going to duplicate a users folder, and here I'm going to put two files. One for user configuration. I don't know if I'll get to configuration today. That would be setting up string lengths, relationships, kind of declaring how the table is going to be set up. But the other table that I'll make is the repository. So user repository, which is going to inherit from iUser repository. Hooray. Now we need to implement some stuff. So I want to move, the whole point of this member is to move that handler, or to take that DbContext that was in that endpoint. Endpoints. This thing, and get this Riome DbContext out of here and get it into a handler. So let's make that handler so that I have I'm making this all at once, and it's probably a lot to kind of keep in your head, but it's just the way that I kind of need to do this. So if I make a new, so I'm in application, I'm in health checks, and I'm going to add a new health check DB handler. I'm going to just grab the health check handler, copy and paste most of it. Update, 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 update. Get rid of this. Implement everything missing. Cool. The way that I want to work this, so if I was going to set this up still with the old DbContext, all I would do something like this, DbContext, DbContext. I guess that wouldn't work this because I don't have DbContext here at the application level. I also don't have the DbContext factory. This is why we couldn't test it this way, which is why I had to put DbContext up at the top, which is a huge no-no. What I am going to be doing instead is iUser repository. Keep in mind this is not user repository. We don't have access to that, remember? I'll get iUser repository. So just for the sake of showing, if I try to make a user repository, it doesn't exist. It just keeps trying to think that it's the user, the iUser repository. It doesn't know that this actually exists above it, which is the way that we want it. I get the yellow because I'm not initializing. And now the plan here would be like, do our count or test against the DB, right? And it would be something like user repository something, okay? So on the user repository, I am going to set up a few things, I suppose. Let's do a task, nullable user, and I'm just going to do a get async, and this is going to take an expression of a function of a user and a bool, and I'm going to call it predicate. This sounds crazy, it looks wild and funky. It's really not. This is pretty much what EF Core wants to take. So I'm basically saying, hey, pass the function you want to run, pass the where clause you want to run, and I'll run the where clause for you and give it back to you. I prefer to just do a generic get async with like a generic kind of where predicate. This, in my head, a get is always a singular get, so this is like a first or default, or a singular default. I'm always going to keep this running as a first or default. If you want to make a single async or something, go for it. The reason I do it like this is because I don't want to have to do get by ID, passing ID, get by email, get by username. I don't want to do all that. I can literally do all three of these just from the one. So I don't need to kind of make all of these one-offs just by, I can just have the one. So I'm also going to make a list, and let's make our count right away too. So we've got a list, which is going to return a list of users, and then an integer, because this one is going to be our count. Super clear? We're going to abstract all this away, but I just want to build one all the way through to kind of make it clear what we're doing here first. Looking at the time, I don't think we're going to get through the abstraction yet today. I'm going to have to kind of put that on like a next part here, but let's at least finish this bit up here. So I've got get, list, and count on iUser repository. I need to implement these functions, which means I need to go to user repository. You can see I've got a red already because it's telling me I don't have those implemented. Riome has this like implement. Everybody has this where it'll kind of put at least the tags in for you, or at least the definitions in there, but obviously it's not doing all the work for me, which maybe someday AI, right? We'll see. So I need to set these up. They're all very, very, very easy queries, so we can do this actually really quickly. I'm going to take a few things from dependency injection. An iLogger, because I always want an iLogger, whether I'm using it or not. And then this is where I could theoretically have put in a Riome DbContext. I can't do that anymore. Now I need to grab a DbContext factory of Riome DbContext. And then I need to import, and then I need to create a constructor. So these are created, and they're both, pulling from dependency injection. I'm going to do just something right here. This will get abstracted away again later, but Riome DbContext, get context, which would be create. Actually, there's an async version of this. Let's just go ahead and try to keep everything async, right? Let's do this. I'm not even going to do that. I don't even want to do that. I don't want to extract that away. It's literally one line of code that I'm abstracting. There's no point in that for me. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to use DbContext factory. Let me throw in a wait in here and an async in here. And of course, I got to make this async. I got to make them all async. The implement method doesn't actually grab the async on it. So in this sense, we're using it and then immediately dropping the connection. You want to talk about unit of work? This is literally unit of work pattern. It's not called unit of work, but like here's one unit of work, one unit, getting done across this context before it gets, put away. So we need this get. So I'm going to grab something like wait ctx users first or default async and just pass in the predicate. Okay. The predicate, I can actually just return entity here, but to show the predicate is like when we just kind of do like a TID equals whatever ID, or user, I guess I don't have a username, do I? First name equals something, or email equals something. That's what a predicate is. It's the clause that you're kind of passing along, which in this case is an expression function. T source in this case is user, and even they call it a predicate behind the scenes. That's probably where I pulled the naming from. So I can copy this because they're so similar. This one's first or default. For the list, it's just where and toList async. For the count, it's just count async. That's it. I just made 3 queries in like, I don't know, a minute or two here. And now later on, we'll be able to abstract these away so we don't have to write these for every single table. We can actually make these extremely dynamic. So we have to write very, very, very few queries. They'll all be kind of run off of this. Okay, so I've got my iUser repository, and I implemented the iUser repository. In my dependency injection for persistence, I need to add that as a service. This is another one that we're going to add a dynamic service registration kind of thing, but I'm low on time today, so let's make that we'll start the next episode doing that one. So what I'll do is I'm going to do a services.addScoped, and I need to add iUser repository here of user repository. So this would be one of those things where we make some kind of a marker type interface and we kind of grab it and then we implement all repositories without needing to kind of add 500 repositories. Not that we'll have 500 tables, but you know what I mean. I don't want one of these for every single table. I'd like to just kind of group them up and find them. So iUser repository is registered as a iUser repository. Or sorry, user repository is registered as an iUser repository. Back in our health check DB handler, where we're pulling our iUser repository, now we can actually just do our same count where it's not deleted. And we will get some kind of a count, and we will return that count if I properly put the variable there. This is giving me a task. I need to await it. So this does that same count against the database that we did. It's returning a result with an integer, which means I need to tell this it's a result of an integer, otherwise that will fail. That's another compile time issue you could run into. not compile time. It would compile perfectly fine, but when you run the query, you would not get the data. You would not get the count out of it. But I caught it. So let's go back to our health checks endpoint, and here where we're doing Riome DbContext. If I run this, and actually I'm just going to do it just to watch it break, this won't work anymore because there is no Riome DbContext, I don't believe. This would be pretty interesting if there is. So it starts up. Let's just hit the DB check. It actually does run. So apparently the factory does kind of still make some kind of a DbContext. That's really kind of interesting. I want to look into that, but I don't have the time. Let me let's hook this up quick. So let's do a stop. Let's get this out of the way. Let's go ahead and add our health check DB handler. Now we pretty much just do this again, don't we? Not quite that. Yeah, I am getting results, so this is more true to what it should be. Let's run this to make sure we're getting a result object with that integer in it now, and to make sure that our factory and our repository and all that stuff is working, because now we're actually using the appropriate ones. Let's run, zoom, and you can see we're getting a data of 0 and a success, which is cool. So that's basically it for today, but out of curiosity, just since before I sign out, I want to go to my, God, that takes up so much space. Presentation layer dependency injection. I want to take a look at, sorry, persistence dependency injection. I want to look at this add DbContext factory. I'm curious how that Riome DbContext existed. That's DbContext. DbContext factory. Which calls this one. I'm gonna have to dig for a long time here. Just tell me how you're doing that. I'm curious why one exists when it shouldn't. Why does it keep throwing me the top? I don't know. I am kind of interested. You know, I'm curious on how behind the scenes it must automatically create, I don't know, a scoped or a transient or some kind of version of it. Or I'm missing something and I have some other thing going on. But as far as I know, this should not have been creating a DbContext. But you know, maybe it does because it needs it for something. Or maybe it's something unique to, you know, Postgres or something like that. Either way, it's all working, and as long as we, you know, stick ourselves to staying with the factory, we know everything's working that route. So stay tuned for, we need to abstract away for the repositories. I need to get all that kind of into its own little abstract class that we can kind of use as a marker abstract class. And then we're going to expand into login and authentication and authorization. We probably got a couple more episodes before we can get there, but that's where we're headed to. We're getting closer and closer to that kind of stuff now that we have data tables, we've got some repositories, we've got endpoints and handlers. We're making really, really good progress. So I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good day.